questions. Lord Deer.
Yes, thank you. Can I turn your attention to the regulation of the commodities markets? MiFID 2 proposes that rules are introduced to regulate commodity derivatives and their markets to support liquidity and to prevent market abuse and to improve orderly function. And I wonder how you assess that new regime. We would be interested in that. And also whether you agree with the view that MiFID presents, and I quote, an opportunity to curb excessive financial speculation on food prices and ensures that the commodity derivatives markets fulfill their intended purposes of enabling hedging and price discovery. It would be helpful if you could also add on perhaps a comment on the Finance Watch's proposals in these regards.
Yes. Commodities markets, commodity derivatives markets, and in particular agricultural derivatives markets are useful. They have existed for a long time and they should exist. Why should they exist? Because they serve a meaningful purpose of hedging for market participants, i.e. institutions or people who have a normal, natural economic interest in producing, selling, buying commodities in general and agricultural commodities in particular. 3 points I want to make. First thing is, financialization of commodity markets is a perverse, and I mean the word, phenomenon. Why do I say that? Because financial markets are about investing. Investing is about bringing capital to productive use. All the money put by investors into commodities market, or should I say none of that money goes to productive use. It remains in the financial system. So this is not investing, this is betting. So that's the first thing to say. Second thing is, all serious studies, and there are plenty of them, show that somewhere between 20 and 30% of speculation on agricultural commodity markets is useful, necessary for price formation and acting as the counterpart to hedgers. Yeah. A farmer willing to sell crop forward, speculators buys the crop forward, it makes sense, all that happens. When you have a market where about 70%, which is the case today, of derivatives, agricultural derivatives positions are speculative, the market gets distorted. And not only because prices are being pushed up, they are, but it's not the only problem. The other and as important problem is that the economic meaningfulness of the market for hedgers, for natural hedgers, has at the very least diminished, if not disappeared. So for a hedger, the price that hedger is selling or buying at has less and less economic meaningfulness. And that is a very fundamental problem. Last but not least, today there are about $500 billion, sorry, my numbers are in dollars, but it doesn't matter, of financial product linked to commodity markets. There is just no way that $500 billion worth of commodity products, of financial products linked to commodities, can have no impact on the market. And that is very, very detrimental, not only to the price formation mechanism, as I just explained, but to the actual level of food prices, because we all know, I'm not sure we have time to get into that in commodity markets, the future price drives the underlying physical price, when in most financial markets it's the other way around. Happy to go into that if you wish. So
perhaps we better pause there, because otherwise we won't get a chance.
Sorry.
I'm particularly grateful for your answers, but I'll come back to that at the end. Dr. Swinburne, do you have a comment? I know you have
I can be quite short on this, because I believe commodity markets are global and should be regulated as such, and therefore I look to the IOSCO task force and their results, and I'm very glad that the Commission has effectively transposed the IOSCO task force findings into MiFID as it stands. More transparency, more identifiers, giving regulators more oversight. This needs to be globally done, and so I don't think we should deviate from what is IOSCO's proposals.
Viscount Brookborough.
Can we look briefly at investor protection? AFME argue in favour of investor protection, appropriately addressing institutional and retail needs. First of all, to what extent does MiFID II meet the objective? And secondly, for Mr. Philippon, you say in your booklet that there are flaws in the current proposals. Would you like to elaborate?
But the flaws
Sorry,
I forget.
Page 58.
Well,
Page
Dr. Swinburne,
58.
would you like to,
Yeah,
would
sorry.
you come on the floor first?
No. Well, anyway, I mean, the main point is that, as very well tested in this country, inducements are about not trusting that consumers can realize that they're buying a service and that they should be paying for it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the UK has tested the fact that transparency on inducement is not sufficient to stop not satisfactory market practices. So this is really fundamental. Inducements should be banned very simply because they are a way of hiding the margin that is perceived by product manufacturers or distributors as the result of the work they're doing as sales. And if we believe, once again, that this is about a free economy, I have a real problem in building a system where we cannot trust the customer to say, I understand that I'm buying a service and therefore I should be paying for it. Transparency of inducements is not sufficient. And why is it not sufficient? That is because the reality of a financial product is that you have a leaflet about the size of this one, and then nobody reads fine print, and it doesn't effectively protect the consumer.
It's really about independence, isn't it? Because the buyer is the seller is, in this case, an independent person, is not necessarily working for the buyer.
No, but absolutely.
Dr. Swinburne?
The Commission's proposals are introducing a distinction between independent and other types of advice, and that only tackles inducements on independent advisors. It doesn't actually address any of the issues on tied agents, where I think the issues are just as problematic as any other form of payments being made. It doesn't therefore address a level playing field, and it certainly doesn't try and get one system across the EU. Now, I'm not advocating that one system across the EU is necessary, but I do think that we need full transparency. And if we can't get one system, and if the retail distribution review proposals that I have put in as amendments don't carry any traction with the European Parliament, and I suspect they might not, then I think the solution is probably for a hard disclosure regime, no matter where the advice is coming from within MiFID, so that all advisors, whether independent, dependent or tied, actually are subject to the same disclosure of every level of fee that is being made. And it's certainly not one or two fees. We've actually got a template that we've put in as an amendment, which I think has over a dozen disclosures that are required. I was very surprised at how many fees are hidden across the board, across all different models. So I think we need
but
disclosure.
Many of the people who are investing in these markets have really no knowledge of the market at all, and as we've seen from how complicated it is almost impossible for them to fully understand it. So there will always be this.
There will be, but disclosure, I think, is the way to go. And it has to be very definite disclosure in terms of firm things that have to be disclosed, because if you call it something slightly different in a different jurisdiction, they will avoid disclosure. So we need to have a very definite decision on what disclosure will mean and how transparent it is. And just to wrap up on the investor protection, I think AFME have argued about addressing institutional and retail needs with regards to investor protection. At the moment, best execution only applies to retail. I would like to see that extended so that those who are actually executing on behalf of institutional investors also have a best execution principle applied to them, so that they also have the best prices for their investors.
Colleagues, this has been a fascinating hour. I do apologise to colleagues, especially on the left-hand side of the table, for either abbreviating some of the questions or missing out some. we have missed out some of the questions. I do turn to you as our witnesses, and we will be making, as I say, a transcript we will send to you of this conversation. I hope that you can not only correct that, but also supply us with written answers if they're not available in the two excellent pieces you've already submitted to us of those questions.